Welcome, everybody, to FanStream Sports, powered by DSP Media. This is the Fighting Irish Daily Blitz, and I'm your host, Rob Fidoff, also known as RPT. You can find me on X at PFidoff. This is episode 101 of the Fighting Irish Daily Blitz. This is the Central Michigan preview for this Saturday, September the 16th. But first things first, head over to our website at fanstreamsports.com for additional podcast information. If you have an Apple device, an Android device, please feel free to download the mobile app for FanStream Sports. And then also, if on our Facebook page, like that page, there's additional content out there as well. Please feel free to share that with your friends and family. Some basic information about this game for Central Michigan. The big thing you need to know, it's not on NBC. You're thinking, well, it's a home game. It's got to be on NBC. They televise all Notre Dame games at home. However, one a year, they put on their streaming service called Peacock. This is that game. So for this game, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, it's on the Peacock streaming service. I repeat, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Peacock streaming service. If you do not have that service, most local bars do have that service. Go over to a friend's house that has that service. I do have that service, and you can just sign up for it too to be able to watch the game as well. I know last year I got in on a deal for about $1.99 a month. They've since raised that to $5.99, but I think for new customers, they have been running some deals here and there. I don't know if it's for the $2 a month like I got in on, but you may want to check that out in case you do not want to go to a bar or go over to a friend's house and just stream it on your own. 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Peacock streaming service. Other just general information about this game. Central Michigan, they are the Chippewas out of the Mid-American Conference, and that's the MAC. Schools like Toledo, Bowling Green, they come in at 1-1. Their first game they lost to Michigan State 31-7, and then last week they won against New Hampshire or New Hampshire. Some people say it either way, 45-42. This is what I found interesting with this game. They are coached by Jim McElvain. I think it's some say McElwain. I'm going to say McElvain first. It's easier to pronounce. You might remember that name. He was at Colorado State a few years back, and then it was a big hire for Florida at the time when he went to Florida. Let's just put it bluntly, it was a disaster from the start. He ended up getting fired from there, or it was just a mutual agreement to part ways. He was not at Florida that long, but he has been at Central Michigan since 2019. The analysis that I do today, it's going to be pretty simple. This is only their third game, our fourth game. This should be a dominant win. Hopefully this game's over by halftime. Hopefully it's 31-35, if not 40-0 or 40-7. Similar to the Tennessee State game where we can sit Sam Hartman and the starters in the second half, get the younger guys in, and get ready for Ohio State for that big game the following week. But no disrespect for Central Michigan, but it is what it is. They are a MAC school, and hopefully this game's over by halftime. Some general information here with their stats. Both their quarterback is obviously their leading passer and also their leading rusher, Burt Emanuel Jr. He's 18 of 36 for 280 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He's also the leading rusher. 38 carries for 142 yards and 2 TDs. And Chris Parker is their leading receiver, 5 receptions for 142 yards. If you look at their overall stats, offensively, they're a better rushing team than passing team. Rushing the ball, they average about 180 yards a game. That's pretty good. But passing, they only average 150 yards passing per game. Hence, they're a better rushing team than passing teams. That's the way it looks on paper, at least. I've not seen them on film at all this year. Defensively, looks to be a decent rushing defense. They only give up 86 yards per game. But here's where I see the big opportunity for Notre Dame. It's as if they hadn't had a big opportunity just playing this opponent as is. They give up 386 yards passing per game. I repeat, 386 yards passing per game. Sam Hartman and the receiver should have a field day in the first half, at least hopefully in the first half. Have a big first half, and then rest up in the second half, get the younger guys in, and put this game away early. Here's what I wanted to mention too. I shorthanded the the defense in the NC State game. I really didn't go over their stats in depth, but they really had I mentioned before, Maris Leofau had his best game ever as a Notre Dame player during that game, but they really held their own during that game. I know Brennan Armstrong did make some plays here and there, but he's a solid player. He's going to make some plays, and you just have to tip your hat off to him. But I had said earlier that they had only 2 interceptions that led to 14 points. They actually had 3 interceptions. 2 of those did lead to 14 points, but they actually had 3 turnovers during that game, and they were all interceptions. Xavier Watts had an interception. Benjamin Morrison had an interception. And then also DJ Brown. So DJ Brown, Xavier Watts, and Benjamin Morrison all had interceptions during that game. And they were led by Thomas Harper with 7 tackles and Jack Kaiser with 6. But they really played just an outstanding game overall. As I said during that podcast, the offense just kind of was just in la-la land for most of the game. But then those turnovers helped the offense turn it around later in the second half. What else here? So this is the thing where that's pretty much it for the analysis for this Central Michigan preview. But this is going to lead into a pop culture reference that I think is going to be pretty relevant as we head into the second quarter of the football season after this game, as when we get into the Ohio State game, Clemson, USC. First things first, before I get into the pop culture reference, we have to continue to be a better tackling team. That was relevant in the NC State game. We had been pretty helter-skelter in the Tennessee State game. Some questionable tackling. It got better in the second half, but you got to tackle better as we head into the second quarter of the season. And that really held up during the NC State game. We cannot have these 6 to 7 3-and-outs. I know NC State was a decent defense, but with Ohio State coming up, Clemson, USC, Duke, we have to get better offensively and not just kind of be just kind of going through the motions is what I'm trying to say. We got to get better with those 3, or not to have those 3-and-outs is what I'm trying to say. And here's the big thing as I look at my notes here. I kind of back to that point, just be crisper on offense and not just have these laws that we saw at NC State. But here's the big thing for me, and this goes into my pop culture reference. I recently rediscovered Silver Spoons, popular 1980 sitcom, ran from 1982 to 1987. It was on NBC from 82 to 86. Then it went into syndication for the last year, the 86-87 season. And I always just thought just certain shows like Baywatch, they were very successful when they got canceled by NBC, went to syndication. But a lot of shows did that. Too Close for Comfort was one. Silver Spoons was another. But I'm finding out more and more shows ended up finishing their run on syndication. But anyway, Silver Spoons, I watched that show as a kid in the 80s. I watched probably every episode. It was a weekly event at our household. But it wasn't like one of the more popular shows. Let's just put it this way. I considered a show that I followed in the 80s or a popular show where I would watch it multiple times, whether it was a current rerun or when it went into syndication reruns where you would watch it after school, or whether it would be on like 7 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock at night on some other non-network channel is what I'm trying to say. But I was more into where I watch a show more than once, like big fan of The Cosby Show, Growing Pains, Family Ties, Night Court, Roseanne. Not really. Alpha's more just just watch the show once and that was it. But anyway, let me get to my point. Silver Spoons, I finally discovered it again on Tubi a few weeks back, and I'm like, oh, I'll watch that again. I was pleasantly surprised. It was better than what I remember it being. And that's what I want this Notre Dame team, as they get further and further into this season. We've seen it way too many times in the past. They go 10-2, 11-1, 12-0, and then just get annihilated by Alabama in that national title game. And we've always come to, not always, but it's usually been, well, we weren't as good as what we thought we were. We thought we were a really good team. We thought we really had a really good quarterback. Yes, they were solid, but we're not as good as what we thought we were. I want this year to be where, as we get into the season, whether it's into a major bowl or into the playoffs, maybe even a national title game, where we say, hey, this team was better than what we thought. They just got better and better as the season went on. And that's what Silver Spoons was to me, because let me tell you about Silver Spoons for my pop culture reference. The show epitomized the 80s to a T. When I look at the set design, the clothes they were wearing, I'm like, oh my God, this was the 80s through and through. And then also, Ricky Schroeder was a pretty damn good child actor for the time. Also, the dad of that show, I know when you think of like TV dads, his name was Edward Stratton III on the show, but it was played by actor Joel Higgins. Great actor, great comedic actor. He was kind of the gel that held that cast together. And he was kind of, I think, I don't want to say second fiddle, but I just don't think people appreciated how good he was. Because obviously the beautiful Erin Gray, which was his administrative assistant, then became his girlfriend, and then they got married. She was obviously a fan favorite. She came from Battlestar Galactica. And then Ricky Schroeder, obviously big-time child actor at the time. But here was the thing I learned as I researched this. I forgot Jason Bateman was on that show for the first 2 seasons. He played a smart-aleck friend of his, Derek. And I read up that he was becoming more popular than Ricky Schroeder because his character was such a great character, being a smart-ass pretty much, and just a very great comedic timing for a child actor himself. What ended up happening, they ended up cutting his contract for season 3, and he ended up going to another sitcom that pretty much bombed the first year. But then he got into Valerie, and then that became the Hogan Family. And then, long story short, he wasn't hurting at the end. I've done a podcast on him before, where he still had a very good child acting career, and then in adulthood, he's really gone above and beyond. But they ended up cutting his character because he's becoming more popular than Ricky Schroeder. So what they ended up doing was they cut that character and hired Alfonso Ribeiro, who was well known at the time for the Michael Jackson Pepsi commercial. He could break dance really well. But that made the show even more popular. But I kept trying to think, well, had they kept Jason Bateman, then add Alfonso Ribeiro, Ricky Schroeder, they still would have. I still think the show would have been pretty good, and maybe it would have lasted longer than 1987. Maybe it would have went into the 88, 89, and maybe even into the 90s. But that's the thing with Notre Dame. This team is very deep. Don't just shortchange the players. If a senior is, the starting, receiver or what any position it is what I'm trying to say. If there's a young player pushing them, you got to play them. Don't be like Silver Spoons. Yes, it was better than I expected. This show, it was a great show. I mean, it was better than, as I said earlier. But if you have a character that's maybe how can I say this? Overshadowing the main character, like Ricky Schroeder's character, who I think he was Ricky in the Silver Spoons as well. You got to play. You got to get everybody involved is what I'm trying to say. No matter how many seniors you have, upperclassmen, the young kids are pushing them, play them as well, and who knows what would have happened with Silver Spoons had you had a Jason Bateman, Alfonso Ribeiro, who ended up going to the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air playing Carlton. He had a really good career there as well. I'm trying to say, like I said, I kind of got long-winded there. Sorry to do that. But what I'm trying to say is for the second quarter of the season, we want to see this team being better than what we thought they were. But also, if those younger kids are pushing them, you got to play them as well. Don't cut them like what they did with Jason Bateman. But I can't say enough with Silver Spoons as we get into this pop culture reference again. Much better than I thought. The grandfather in that show was very good. I think his name was John Houseman. What else? Franklin Seals, I think was the name, who was the business manager for Edward Stratton III. But I can't say enough about that. The dad in the show, he was excellent. Very great comedic timing. He's not really known for being a popular TV dad of the 1980s. The Jason Severs, the Alan Thicke, Bill Cosby. I know take aside what we know about right now, but he was a very popular TV dad for that time. But Joel Higgins, I can't say it enough, just pleasantly surprised how good he was in the show. And just overall how great that show was, that from what I remember it, in the 1980s. And back to the TV dad, Joel Higgins, who played Edward Stratton III, it's very eerie because I'm a big fan of Ken Berry from Mayberry RFD, from F Troop. That was way before my time, F Troop, and even Mayberry RFD. But then Mama's Family, I know him the best because that was in the 1980s. Another show that was on NBC got canceled, went into syndication, and became more popular. But if you listen to Ken Berry and if you listen to Joel Higgins, they sound eerily similar. Their voice is very, very similar. I can't say it enough. And he kind of reminded me of just Ken Berry in general, especially for his comedic side, comedic timing during that show. And that's another thing too with Notre Dame. Maybe there's just similar players where we just don't know about, where our depth's even deeper than what we think. I can't say enough with this pop culture reference. I want it to be where we're deeper than what we think and we're better than what we think, instead of in years past where, oh my God, we get to the bowl game, we're so excited, we're going to finally win a big bowl after 30 years. We're finally going to win a playoff game after not after 30 years, but a big game after 30 years. But we find out this team was not as good as what we thought. The coaching was not as good as what we thought. With Silver Spoons and with Notre Dame this year, I want them to be like Silver Spoons in the 1980s. I forgot or just didn't realize how good that show was. It epitomized the 1980s. The acting was better than I thought. The TV dad, Joel Higgins, was better than I thought. Reminds me of Ken Berry. They sound the same as well. But that's what we want to get with the second quarter of the season into the third quarter, the fourth quarter. And whether it's a New Year's Six Bowl or a playoff appearance, even better, a national title, I want this team to be better than expected, just like what I realized with Silver Spoons of the 1980s. So thank you so much for joining me for episode number 101 on the Fighting Irish Daily Blitz. And as always, go Irish.